Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Science Industry Talk 2020, Bringing Science to Life. My name is Maggie Childs, and I'll be guiding you through the talks today. The event will be streamed from laptops all around. I'm actually the only one who's here at the IST Austria campus in the IST Park building, so right at the center of groundbreaking research and tech transfer happening in Austria. So first, before we start out with the talks themselves, the keynote and the panel that we'll be having afterwards, we'll be hearing some welcome words, first from the president of IST Austria, Thomas Henzinger, then Georg Knill will also share some thoughts about his role as president of the Federation of Austrian Industries, and then Heinz Faßmann, Austria's Federal Minister of Education, Science and Research, has recorded a video for us. So to start off, we'll kick off with Thomas Henzinger.
Thank you. Also, welcome from my side, everybody, especially Heinz Faßmann, the Federal Ministry of Science and Research, who will be with us with a video message. Georg Knill, the President of the Federation of Austrian Industries, and the keynote speaker and all the panelists. Welcome and thank you. The Science Industry Talk now takes actually place for the 12th time. Always in cooperation with the Federation of Austrian Industries. It is all about technology transfer from science to industry and about enabling the exchange of ideas and the formation of new connections between science and industry. This year's topic is bringing science to life, and it focuses on the environment that is necessary to foster creativity and excellence in science on one hand, and at the same time guides the transition of research results into industrial application. The IST Park opened a year ago, and together with IST's Technology Transfer Office and the IST Cube Seed Fund, it provides the innovation infrastructure and support that enables our scientists to bring their insights to the market. Tonight, we'll discuss the technology transfer ecosystem on the global scale and also on the local scale here at IST Austria. We'll get glimpses into the work of several members of the IST faculty, which is on the way to commercial use already. And our distinguished panelists will discuss this and give their feedback. We'll also highlight current developments and future opportunities for technology transfer at IST Austria. As a frontier research institution, IST contributes crucially to the strengthening of the Austrian economy. And with this in mind, I'm now welcoming and handing over to Georg Knill, the President of the Federation of Austrian Industries. Welcome.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Henzinger. Thanks very much for giving this opportunity. Ladies and gentlemen, a wonderful afternoon, evening. Thanks very much. It's a big honor and pleasure for me to open this science talk today. And for me, it's the first time. You have mentioned it's taking place already 12th time. For me personally, it's the first time, and there's a very special tight bond between the Institute of Science and Technology and the Federation of Austrian Industry, and this also reflects in this annual event that we organize together. Well, the COVID situation, and we all see it and face it, makes it necessary to have these talks now online digital for the first time. As you're aware, Austria, but probably most countries, economies in this world are now facing the second lockdown. And we ourselves find us in the middle of the most severe recession since many, many decades. Our expectations for this annual year will be a reduction in our GDP of almost 8%. So this is definitely a big burden, especially on the Austrian industry. But nevertheless, we do not see exactly how long this crisis will last, but we see and have already 3 lessons learned, which we can see out of this situation of COVID. First, digitalization contributes significantly to resilience. We all know distance learning, home office, video conferencing, so we could see and learn what digitalization is possible within a very short period of time, but also we see what is still needed to become a leader in digitalization globally. Secondly, global networking value change also increases the vulnerability and dependency across Europe. And in the near future, it will become more and more important to safeguard our sovereignty in strategically important sectors, and at the forefront, our technology sector. And third, science, technology, and innovation play a key role in overcoming this exceptional situation and preparing society for similar events in the future. There is only a return into the old normality when medicines and vaccines are available, which has to come from life science and their technology companies. And this is also the motto of our today's evening, bringing science to life. As you can see, our modern world revolves increasingly around science, technology, and innovation. But how can we create a more stable bridge between these two worlds? How do we manage to transfer scientific discoveries to companies and then forwards to applications? Three possible ways I see. First, the transfer via minds. We are talents that connect both worlds, that of science and that of businesses. Secondly, transfer via technology matching, by providing a better overview of where there is compatible knowledge and thus compatible opportunities in science and industry. And third, transfer via structures, through optimal support facilities in science and conditions that motivate researchers to put their knowledge and ideas into practice. And in this context, I would also like to emphasize on the importance of IST Austria, not only because of its exceptional scientific work, no, because, and especially because of its best practice example of knowledge and technology transfer here in Austria. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I look forward for an interesting keynote, very fruitful discussions, and an enjoyable evening. Thanks very much, and have a good industry science talk today. Thanks very much.
We're going to hear a few welcome words also now from Heinz Faßmann, the Federal Minister of Education, Science and Research. He's recorded a welcome address for you.
Mr. Henzinger, Mr. Knill, distinguished guests, my last visit at IST Austria has left me impressed of the ongoing activities on the still young campus. Not only because every time I set foot on the campus, its landscape has once again changed into something advanced, but mainly because of the visible scientific progress that is already happening right before our eyes. This always leaves me impressed. Especially the successes seen in the Institute's tech transfer prove the enormous potential of the Institute and show the capacity of its international researchers. Here we witness in real time how their scientific output is successfully translated into a resource that serves Austria way beyond its academic landscape and will do so in the future. Now, talking from my academic point of view as an human and social geographer, I'm convinced that the implementation of IST Austria is definitely going to be a decisive factor for granting future wealth and further development for the region. One could ask, and indeed many have, why does an idyllic yet definitely remote and rural place as Maria Gugging even needs a top-of-the-art research facility? By now, skeptics should have been convinced This year so far was full of challenges we still have to overcome. Throughout this pandemic, we could learn two very important lessons. We cannot always know what the future holds, and it sure helps to be prepared on a long term. Well, the only thing that provides preparedness for the eventualities the future hold is basic research. East Austria already holds many excellent examples of bold scientific thinking. Many of these endeavors will tackle pressing issues of our modern world, such as health, mobility, and climate change. It is often lifelong working and dedication of these scientists that weapons us against threats, like the coronavirus, in order to find answers to questions that no one yet has asked. The value of basic research lies within this preparedness against challenges that we cannot even predict today. As much as applied research is necessary for any economy, it needs basic research to perform groundbreaking innovation and to ensure resilience and adaptability of both our economy and our society. We are impressed to witness that not only the project of a world-class research facility in Lower Austria proves to have been spot on, but also the concept of the IST Technology Park. Only 1 year after first opening its doors, it already proves to be a bridge that closes the gap between the research and its early phases of commercialization. Therefore, I congratulate East Austria on successfully connecting these two worlds. Thanks to research facilities as East Austria that are looking ahead, I stop predicting threats and dangers, but I begin to see challenges and opportunities that we will overcome through science, knowledge, and innovation. The Federal Ministry of Education, Science and Research, together with its partner, the province of Lower Austria, is committed to continuously support the institutes in its future fruitful development. Excellent, world-class basic research entails the potential for radical innovation, and I would like to stress that technology transfer has already been part of East Austria's blueprint. East Austria has proven to be a great scientific success story. Since the Institute's innovative activities in the field of technology transfer are of particular significance, I'm already looking forward to the future contributions and developments deriving from the campus. Thank you very much.
As Minister Heinz Faßmann just said, it's all about being prepared. And the Science Industry Talk has the wonderful title, Bringing Science to Life. And I think that's what IST really embodies as well, taking the research, the preparation that has already taken place, and really bringing it to life, putting it into practice and implementing the research and the science that is being created here. So also, times of crisis can sometimes offer opportunities, but they definitely show stark contrasts. And these past months have shown how critical it is that we not only conduct as excellent science and research here, but also that bring that science to life and really bring it to fruition so it can benefit society as a whole. And as we all know, Europe has always had a good track record in conducting science and research, Austria in particular, but has had a less impressive track record when it comes to commercialization and turning those results of science into patents and ultimately products and services, jobs and economic benefits. So in this talk, we want to aim to raise awareness for these topics, celebrate the first year of IST Park, here where we are today, which opened on September 30th, 2019, and also highlight some of the innovative companies that are working here. As case studies, they clearly demonstrate how science is brought to life on an everyday basis here at IST. So we have speakers from academia, business, and startups, and they're all going to give us insights on not only what happens here, but also where we stand globally in tech transfer and also bringing science to the world. So for everyone in the audience, just briefly, if you have questions, please remember them, write them down, because there is a chance to mingle and network after the talk at the end of the stream. You have a link in the email that you got yesterday for the registration, and you can join the chat platform there after the stream is over. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker. His name is Dr. Matthias Evers. He's a senior partner at McKinsey's Hamburg office and co-leads the firm's global research and development and medical work in the pharmaceutical and medical products practice, as well as the cross-sectoral innovation practice globally. So Matthias Evers, welcome.
Thank you very much, Maggie, for the kind words. And Mr. Henzinger, Mr. Knill, dear colleagues on the panel and the audience. I mean, it's a real honor here. And as a scientist by background, I'm excited about your aspiration at the IST. And so I'm more than excited to spend the next 15 minutes to talk a little bit about the importance of tech transfer for Europe. So let me put this up. Because what I tend to do is provide a little bit of macro perspective on this very much an issue, because I think we believe on our side as a team that the tech transfer is an instrumental, particular important topic that we need to get right to drive innovation, and through innovation, prosperity and health to the entire region. So as this slide indicates, there will be a second side of the coin. So I will look at from two sides a little bit in terms of how we have to think about innovation in Europe. And I think I want to start with a very positive picture. Groundbreaking innovation comes out of Europe. There's no doubt about it. Now I'm maybe going a lot back. I mean, I go back to Konrad Zuse, the computer innovation. But artificial intelligence, let's not forget that neural networks, there were a couple of scientists like Jürgen Schmidhuber and others, I mean, in the 90s, who led groundbreaking work. Or the MP3, the coding format, or research in the UK around the World Wide Web, and so on and so on. I think it's also very clear that Europe is a successful region when it comes to education and science. Now, this is of course only one cut. There are so many cuts available, how you prioritize the academic institutions. I just take a very simple one by ranking of Nature publications as a metric for academic excellence. This is debatable. I take this one. And but just maybe also, I mean, you see a couple of European institutions popping up here. And what you see on the left side, 31 out of the top 100 universities in science and engineering sit in Europe. So we have groundbreaking innovations coming out of Europe. We have top quality education and academic science. And there is no shortage and no need for innovation. The need for innovation, perhaps these days, I don't need to talk about it in the age of COVID. So there's a real need for it. There's also a lot of opportunity. So if we call it the fourth industrial revolution or not, but the age of artificial intelligence is one area that will drive a lot more change and not a lot more need for innovation as much as the biological side. So we have here a picture where we have the quality, we have the science, we have shown it before, if I say we for Europe, and we have a huge headroom for innovation. That's in brief my one side of the coin. There's another side of the coin. And Maggie alluded a little bit to it. So let me go through this. Bluetooth. Well, I mean, a lot of the devices are using it are commercialized by others. The MP3 was definitely, I mean, somebody will correct me and it's a different coding format, but the ideas of the MP3 led also to the success of the iPod. On the computer side, on the pharmaceutical side, on the World Wide Web side, on the artificial intelligence side. Again, this is not comprehensive. There are also other firms, absolutely. The weakest example is perhaps the clone chip Dolly. I'm not suggesting there are pharmaceutical companies cloning. My point is the derivative of these innovations is commercialized by others, at a big time. So commercialization is happening elsewhere. I will go to the micro picture, but the macro picture is of course striking. And I couldn't give this very brief talk without showing these numbers, where a couple of the large digital native companies commercializing have a market capitalization that is similar to all European stocks. That perhaps is a shocking figure, not unknown for many, but I mean, seeing it in aggregate, it typically makes me also pause and saying what's going on here around us. Let us go a little bit more into details. And first, let me start with a very selective cut, because somebody might say, okay, here are 4 institutions, but I pick Harvard, Max Planck from the institution, Oxford, and ETH Zurich. So, and I'm just trying to plot a little bit the path from idea, from research to invention to translation into commercialization. And it's a very visual picture where we say, for instance, Max Planck has actually similar output in terms of publication than Harvard. Now, I mean, as you see in the middle column and on the right column, when it comes to patent applications or declaration of inventions, and when it comes to a number of venture projects in incubation, the numbers are very low. So, of course, we'll do a little bit look more broadly. These are only 4 institutions, 4 high-quality institutions, I will say, but you see the very different footprint. I promise you this is the only slide with a small font, but I wanted to get a little bit into the overview where how Europe is positioned when it comes to tech transfer and the broader innovation landscape. I think on the innovation side, you see, I position it as primarily positive. We have high quality education. There's also no shortage of talent. And I'm just taking here software developers as a metric. Of course, there are many other disciplines, but we have even more than in the US. There's also no shortage in terms of research quality, as we talked about. There's also good public funding. I mean, Horizon 2020 as an example. I think where it starts slowly breaking is when it comes into the funding from early to later stages. And I will show you some data more particular about it, but also the application. There's, in particular in quantum computing, AI, but also in the biological space, the gap is widening in terms of patenting, but also in terms of translating it into venturing projects. And that, of course, then plays them through in terms of global growth, which I will illustrate a little bit later. So at the highest level, that's a picture. I mean, that's a picture worth remembering. And I will provide a couple of ideas at the end how to address this gap, basically. Because, I mean, one message to communicate this is also, I believe at least Europe is playing under its weight, given the quality we have. So let's look a little bit more into the venturing scene. So I'm not suggesting venture capital is the only answer here, but it's part of the answer, quite likely. So here we see a bit in terms of total numbers, how much actually venture capital is overweighted in the US versus Europe. No surprise, and also by capita, it's very high in the US. Israel pops up as a leader here on that metric. But of course, given the size of the US, it's a very important venture capital market. Now, let me pause here a little bit because this slide is a little bit more complex, but it's actually quite important to illustrate this point. And because I think the distribution and the importance of investors, early investors by series is changing. And let me start in the middle because it's maybe the easier part here. In an early Series A, let's say, for a European-based company, the majority are European-based investors, right? No surprise there, 80-20 or 83%, 17%. Now, if we move into later stages, the vast majority, 70-30, are non-EU investors. I'm not saying, that's all bad because it's also a good market challenge. So actually, the European companies are good enough to attract foreign investors. However, the problem is actually the markets are not liquid enough. So for large investments for later years, these companies don't get the money. So in some areas, let's say, I mean, I've been doing some research on the biotech scene. This picture is much worse. It's almost 95-5, where a lot of the late stage investments come outside the EU. Well, how does this all add up? It all adds up in a very striking example, and let me try to explain that to you. If you look at the young companies defined as in the last that have entered the top 100 between 2005 and 2018. You see no European company. And that is one of the outputs. I mean, one of the shocking outputs. And of course, you see a lot of US companies, you see some Chinese companies coming up. And I think you see that picture also if you look at, and by the way, young companies defined as younger than 30 years. So that's actually sometimes not very young, one has to say. I think SAP is founded in 1972 or so. It didn't make the cut. Yeah, I mean, if somebody is wondering where do these companies sit, and you see that a little bit playing throughout. I mean, it's in the global top 100. There are different cuts. I just focus on the most recent cut because Europe is really underrepresented here, and this is a consistent picture. So if we step back now, what we are saying here is we have on the one side really contribution to science and innovation out of Europe, high quality, a great breeding ground. And I think those analyses suggest that tech transfer and this important middle part, tech transfer and scaling, is where the issue is. Now, I assume we will also want to discuss a little bit, okay, fine, there is an issue. What could we do about it? And let me, not that it's a theme, let me look at it from two sides. I want to raise 4 ideas here with you, and then maybe provide a little bit a systemic view of what Europe could do. Here I will go carefully point by point. One point is the talent, right? I mean, it's of course a generic statement, have the right talent, but there it's quite broad, the topic, and I want to touch on a few items. We need the scientific, technical, digital talent. I think we have a good position there, as I was quoting some of the figures earlier. We also need serial entrepreneurs. That only happens if people again and again, of course, are entrepreneurial. And what I didn't show you, and to keep this short, is the percentage of postdocs, of scientists going into entrepreneurial activities significantly lower in Europe than in other regions. And there we have a shortage of entrepreneurial talent with the right experience also over time. That has also to do with education on the entrepreneurial side. That has also to do with mobility. So of course, one part is also talent fluidity in the European market, but also talent immigration into Europe. And we all know progress has been made, but that's a broad area. How do we get the right talent for the scaling, not only for the transfer itself, but also for the subsequent scaling? Second point, financial resources. Clearly, high risk capital is needed. You will notice I'm not using the word venture capital here. It might well be that Europe culturally, and I come to culture later, requires a specific solution. So we don't just copy paste and more venture capital, more venture capital. So we have, for instance, high net worth families, family offices. Are there very European specific contracts that could help us and also find new ways? The very simple message would be, let's raise the venture capital market, but also I'm I try to start a dialogue which is maybe a little bit more than just catch up with the US. The third point, I'm actually explicitly raising the point, is there something that's European context aligned? But the broader point here is in terms of operating model, governance and culture, there's something to be done around tech transfer. And the IST is certainly a great example. That's why we are here together. And I think Europe needs more of this. The question is only how can we achieve that the scientists are not getting nervous by creating a company? And a real life example that I'm happy to quote here is that many scientists in Europe would rather say, oh, it's actually, I don't want to go into the business side of the world. I mean, I don't want to quote them as that's the dark side, but they are more afraid of the next paper. Let's be honest here, a lot about the next publication to have the standing in the scientific community and actually creating an enterprise. I think the mindset is very different. Many of us will have experience in the US or in other regions. And I'm not suggesting we need to copy other regions. But what is the model that works in Europe, given this culture? Because it could easily be, are there constructs like tech transfer entities that allow people to test, to maybe do initial validation prior to creating an enterprise? That might be the European answer to actually pull more science out of academia. The last point is more systemic adjustments in terms of even collaborating more. We have a great track record with our large public-private partnerships. Or let me say mission-led growth. That would say, hey, we cannot fix the tech transfer, but maybe Europe needs 2, 3, 4 missions, because we see a little bit under COVID how a mission to cure COVID suddenly aligns resources and drives progress. And this is also my connector to my last slide already, which is saying these are a couple more ideas how Europe could actually change the rules of the games, which is maybe on top of any institute like the IST, but more at the regional level. And I'm not presenting all elements. I just let me hit on 2, 3 core ideas. The one is we have superstars. We have a couple of superstar companies. I mean, for instance, in telecom, in automotive, to take that example that I mentioned here. And could we build stronger academic industry collaboration at those boundaries in these superstar areas, which is a version of this mission-led? Mission-led could be, as I say, a mission like COVID or in future other missions, or around the superstars. We could also, as a third point here, think differently about our very strong public sector. The PPPs, the public-private partnerships, speak a clear language. And how do we even make that even more productive, more effective? Or the last point is perhaps debatable, but we have these large digital firms. Could we leverage their presence in very different ways to make a difference for Europe? Now, on that note, I would just stop on let's do it and close my brief talk and keynote here. And I wish all of us a great discussion today.
Thanks very much, Matthias Evers. He's now going to be joined by the rest of the panelists, who I'd like to introduce to you now. We have with us Erich Tauber. He is CEO and co-founder of Themis Bioscience. We have Dorothee von Laer, who is founder of Vira Therapeutics, and Ingrid Kelly-Spielmann, who is Technology Transfer Manager here at IST Austria. Thanks so much for joining us, you guys. That was a fantastic presentation, Matthias. It's interesting to see everything graphically shown like that. It's just a little bit humbling, I guess, over here in Europe, than to see how other parts of the world are dealing with their scientific innovations in such a different way. And it's a combination of culture. And as you said, these kind of things, and that's what we'd like to talk about right now. Maybe Matthias, to start us off, how do you think that tech transfer in general and this idea of bringing science into the commercial space, how does that affect society as a whole?
Well, I mean, I'm a strong believer, and I say this. I mean, I published before COVID, and I hopefully will continue publishing after COVID on this. But I think science is the foundation of prosperity, and science, and I would combine, actually I talk quite a bit about digital, but my heart is almost more in the biological side. This confluence of the science disciplines, I think, will allow us to work on the big challenges of humankind. I mean, be it food, be it sustainability, etc. So I would almost modify the question a little bit, and I say, it's a necessity we innovate, given the challenges we have. And so I think, if it's a necessity, we have the quality. And so, I mean, the trigger point is, I think for making it usable, if I think about anything, new solutions for food, new solutions that make perhaps food production more sustainable on the carbon dioxide side, whatever it may be, we need also adoption. And that cries out for commercial applications that are actually wanted and desired by the typical customer. And so I see it as an end-to-end chain, not for making entrepreneurs rich, but rather for bringing, fruitful ecosystem that starts with idea to science, to products, to adoption that resolves certain unmet needs.
Getting people to use the science and use the innovations that are
absolutely. Otherwise, we would be all happy in the lab, if I exaggerate, but there's no impact coming out of that science.
Absolutely. And I want to actually direct my next question at Erich and Dorothee, because you both have experience internationally doing research and development. And in your opinion, what do you think is the most striking difference between Europe and other parts of the world when it comes to kind of thinking about, moving things into the commercial sphere? I know Dorothee has also had recently a very, brought a lot of money to Austria actually with her venture, and but it doesn't get the kind of headlines that maybe a biotech startup from Israel or the US would. What do you think is the most striking difference there, culturally or for scientists? Maybe Dorothee, you want to start out.
Well, I mean, of course, this basic issue about risk-taking is, of course, very different in different parts of the world. I've really tried to motivate young research at my institute also to potentially now take over another company, because I'm a bit older now. I don't think I'll start through a new company, but people really tend to prefer their safe home at the university, or to go to a big pharma, or whatever in my field now, a big pharma company, which is sort of also like a governmental thing for what concerns the safety of a job. So, but to do a startup is a matter of risk. And then I also noticed that many Europeans are not good in selling their inventions or their ideas. I have the feeling that they usually that they make sort of an underestimate of what they're doing. They don't really sell it well. People always say I can explain things very simply to people, but that's probably because I grew up in the US, and that's where you learn to explain things simply and not make them unnecessarily complicated, so that an investor would understand what you try to do. I have the feeling that in Europe we may be complicating matters when we're talking to potential investors. And the third thing is that it seems a little bit as if it was immoral. So at my university, it was very difficult because everybody was sort of saying, I'm not a genuine scientist, I just want money, but that wasn't true. I just wanted to see my treatment go to patients, and I didn't have the money to bring it into patients. So I thought I needed a big pharma company to do so. And that's all. And in the end, I was very lucky that it turned out that was privately for me also good financially, but that was never my intention. But many people are saying that it was just greed or something that I followed this up, and that would never happen in the US. They would always stimulate somebody who's doing this, support somebody doing this.
That's so interesting that your success, financial success as well, was frowned upon by I guess colleagues. Eric, did you have a similar experience in the kind of cultural dichotomy there, or do you agree with Dorothee's thoughts about risk taking?
Let me start up with thanking Matthias for his great last sentence. I think, Matthias, you said something like, "This
Let's
is
do
not."
it.
This is no, another one. He said, "This is not to make entrepreneurs rich." And I think with this sentence, you're really getting to the point of why Europe is nowhere and US is there. I think there's so much greed in our industry, and Dorothee mentioned this quite a bit. If you start a company, the first question is, why do you want to get rich on the back of society? So this is not where it is. I don't know about the dimensions of Dorothee. I think this was 4 years ago, and this was a great deal with Boehringer. Newspapers write about our deal, that the Themis deal was the largest biotech transaction in Austria's history. And I can tell you that society and the Republic of Austria has made more money out of the Themis transaction than anybody else. Much more than the entrepreneurs, much more than the venture capital firms. And I think making entrepreneurs rich is a great opportunity for society, because on the back of a few millions to the entrepreneur, there are tens of millions going back to state, going back to the taxpayers, and opening opportunities and motivation for so many scientists or non-scientists who think about starting a company. And I think this mindset we have in Europe is full of skepsis, pessimism, and we should be much more optimistic here.
I think it's interesting what you said, Eric, because a lot of people are talking right now about how people are dealing with the crisis and how in Europe, so many countries have given money directly to the people, right? The Härtefallfonds, the hardship fund here in Austria, or Kurzarbeit, as it's being done in Germany, and here helping employees stay with their employers. And in the United States, that hasn't been working out so well because we don't have those structures in the United States as we do in Europe. And they're saying, well, people don't realize that if you give money to the people, they'll put it back into the economy, they'll spend it, right? I think it's the same thing also if they give money to entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs will reinvest that money. I would almost guarantee it. People who have been inside that space of innovative entrepreneurship usually like to keep their money there and see it work and do new things. I mean, I don't know if that underlines what you're saying, if you don't agree, Eric, but it seems that's what you're saying with the entrepreneurs not being evil, greedy money hoarders. I think he agrees with me. Okay, so why is it then that in Europe we are so much behind the US in regard to the startup activity or the success of startups? So I thought that slide that Matthias showed was very interesting, showing that the early stage investment is alive and well in Europe. We have European investors investing in European companies at the early stage up to Series A. And once we get to later stage, Series B, really kind of the growth stage, the really scaling up, we see that investment really tilt over to the US side or foreign investment in general. Ingrid, why do you think that is? What happens to Europeans' money when it gets to later stage? Why is that shift happening?
I think a big element of this is just time. The US started in tech transfer back in the 1980s when the law changed to encourage universities to engage. And we are a couple of decades behind, so it depends on the country in Europe, but we're definitely behind on that wave. So we're starting back where the US was in the 80s and maybe early 90s. And at that time, the US was also muddling through, I think, and making mistakes. Unfortunately, I think we're not always learning from the mistakes the US made. Initially, there was a big focus, for instance, on out-licensing, and it's taken some time for people to realize that the true value is probably in startups if you look at the value to society as a whole from university tech transfer. And I think, it also goes to the points the others have made that, we're lacking ambition, maybe. We're all a bit afraid of what technology means. We're afraid to put our money where our mouth is. So if you get to the point where someone has, if you like, gone through the system, been brave enough to found a startup and so on, it's finding people around those people who will put money into those companies and really enable them to grow and give them the advice that they need and the network that they need to support them to get there. And I think it's really that network at the later stages that's missing. We're simply not linked into the right people, the right expertise.
I think what Matthias showed as well, this kind of at the fostering of the innovation stage of the innovative process. We're leading. We're there. We're totally in the ballpark of all the leading, not only institutions but also generally where ideas are born. Right. Maybe I'd like to. Yes, Matthias, absolutely.
Yeah, no, allow me. I mean, Ingrid, I really like the point. I think there is a timing delta. I mean, that's actually very fair to acknowledge that. I would maybe, and then also ambition and culture. And I would perhaps, because we didn't, and I also didn't raise it earlier, it's of course also the market. the one market and the market size, because I think that also factors in a bit, because of course we talk one market, but if you then look at tax regimes, VAT regimes, etc., it's then easier to take a business case, take it into the US and take a US-based investor. I think it's perhaps not the main driving force, but let's also throw it into the mix.
I'd like to just briefly, because we're talking about the issues, the challenges, and the problems that Europe faces at the moment, let's look a little bit into the future and also a little bit into kind of our strong side, our Schokoladenseite, as they say in German. What does Europe do well when it comes to innovation and developing these ideas? Where are our strong suits? Where can we really shine? And also, what should we do to preserve that and also further develop it? Any of you? I'm throwing this question out there.
Maggie, if I may start.
Yes, absolutely.
If you look into COVID vaccines, today BioNTech, which is a German company, is the first company who has announced the preliminary phase 3 results. If you look into the 6 top companies in the COVID race, including my company, Themis, who is now part of the MSD family, known as Merck & Co. in the US and Canada. We have Oxford University with AstraZeneca, we have CureVac, we have Moderna, we have Johnson & Johnson. Most of the inventions we have here, like 4 out of the 6 inventions come from Europe. And when you look into what's happening, we as Themis have, you can call it, we have been forced, or we took the opportunity to partner with one of the biggest companies who happen to be an American company. CureVac, as a German company, took German governmental money and flipped to be a Dutch entity and went public on the US stock market. I think, or BioNTech partnering with US Pfizer. You see that we don't have the powers to scale and we don't have the financial environment to scale, but it appears that in the research and in the founding of the company, in the entrepreneurship, there seems to be enough creativity and mindset to be active here.
It still wasn't as positive as I wanted, Eric, but thanks. No, but I mean, I think we've seen now the getting to the international stage is not the hard part. It's really the commercialization and the investment necessary. But what else can we do to foster that initial spark, that innovative spark, and that the great research, for instance, into COVID. I mean, all I know from my American peers are saying they always have to do their tests through their nose. We in Austria, we don't have to do that. You know, we have way better tests here where you just gargle and all this kind of stuff. And they're all jealous. And this is just from the consumer side. So from the science side, what can we do to foster, you know, more growth while it's still here?
May I make a remark? I have the feeling that from the number of inventions that are hyped, the percentage that is successful is higher in Europe than in the US, because we don't sell this stuff. And maybe the investors will understand this more and more as they look at what pops up, like with the COVID vaccine and what really turns out to work. I mean, there's a lot of US labs that claim they have something, but nothing seems to have made it to phase 3. And nothing seems to really work properly. So I think this hyping, this overselling is also dangerous. I think it's not so dangerous maybe in the IT world. That's why a lot has popped up, but it's much more difficult to oversell stuff in the IT world. But in biomedicine, it's very easy to oversell stuff because the experiments are lengthy. You can select the right experiments and show, and so on. And that's what I see a lot when I look at US, not everybody, but many, especially those that are trying to make money off their inventions, they oversell the stuff. So I think to find a good way in between. Something.
You're still here, Dorothea. We hear you. We hear you.
Yeah, good. Yeah, somebody didn't like me smoking. Sorry. I lifted my concentration.
We don't mind. We don't mind at all.
Yelling it, I think it should be okay. If you were in one room, I wouldn't do it. Okay, so yeah, I'm 62 and I can have some freedom in my life. So, okay, yeah, I think we have to find a way in between where people don't underestimate, don't undersell what they're doing, like maybe in Europe, but also this overselling leads to a lot of misdevelopments where money is lost. So I think this is positive in Europe, and I think we should try to make investors see this, that we do not oversell, and what we claim is usually true.
So really raising awareness for the sustainability of innovations coming out of Europe, raising awareness for the fact that not only are the loud innovators worth listening to, but also those who are developing and getting things to a higher level perhaps before they start tooting any horns of any kind. I think that's a great note to leave us on here with what Europe can do, really being a little more proud of showing our strength, showing our strength in sustainable innovation, but also our strength in doing what we do best, which is also this collaboration and feeding ideas at the very start, really seeding them with good collaborations and good partnerships. Now, we'd like to turn from this kind of big picture to the concrete opportunities of technology transfer that we have right here at IST Austria. So we'd like to have a look now at what's going on in terms of research here at IST Austria and IST Park. Roll 'em.
In 2009, the Institute of Science and Technology Austria was founded with one vision in mind: to become a world-class scientific research institute. 10 years later, the institute was ranked third in the worldwide Normalized Nature Index, demonstrating the advances IST Austria has made and the quality of research conducted on campus. Outstanding research requires outstanding scientists. One of these is Professor Maria Ibanez, who leads a research group in the field of thermoelectric materials.
Once we find the proper material, we can build a thermoelectric device. And a thermoelectric device can be used as energy harvester, or it can be used as a Peltier cooler. So that means with the same device, we can produce energy by having temperature difference or by using wasted heat, or we can use that device to control very precisely temperatures. These materials are not cost effective nowadays. So the research we are working is to try to make them more efficient and more cheap so we can integrate these technologies in a normal life.
Building collaborations between scientific disciplines on campus plays a central role in achieving top-quality research. In their work, Professor Scott Vaitukaitis and his group demonstrate the enormous innovative potential of interdisciplinary work.
In our lab, we study the fundamental mechanical, electrical, and rheological properties of materials. And this is useful not only to understand the materials in the world around us at the fundamental level, but also because understanding these properties of materials, we can make new technologies with them. In one of our projects, we're trying to understand why, when we touch two insulating materials together, they exchange electrical charge. And one of the most exciting applications for this effect is in triboelectric generators, which use it to harvest energy.
Not only will new ways of energy production play a key role in the future, the storage of electricity will also become extremely important. Professor Stefan Freundberger may help us find the answers. He is an expert in the fields of materials electrochemistry.
So we are combining material science with flowing electrons. Directly the applications are making better batteries or supercapacitors, so better in the sense of storing more energy per volume or mass, or making them cheaper, making them easier to manufacture with more available elements and better to recycle.
The wide field of life science also holds the potential for many future practical applications of research findings. Professor Sandra Sigert is a leading scientist in the field of neuroimmunology.
We are interested in looking how immune cells influence brain function and interfere, for example, with our mind setting and learning and memory. Our research has shown that we could replace current drug treatment potentially with a light therapy strategy.
Another research group whose work could bring revolutionary changes to the healthcare sector is led by Professor Matthew Robinson.
We combine large-scale DNA data with hospital medical records and hospital inpatient data, and we combine this with statistical models that we develop to get a better understanding of the genetic and environmental risk factors that shape why we get sick and the time at which we get sick later in our lives. We take the results that we have and we can use those to create predictors, and we can create predictors of what your risk will be in future, so that when you walk into an inpatient clinic, we can predict what your outcome would be in the future.
These excellent researchers are laying the groundwork for the technological innovations of tomorrow, ever pushing the boundaries of our knowledge.
Of course, you always have this ideal thought that maybe one day you can bring a new material that can have very interesting properties that, in this case, can help harvesting energy in a more environmentally friendly manner.
I'm fascinated by things in everyday life that seem simple but are actually complex. And especially if these things can be made to do something useful, then I get really excited.
It's fantastic to see the great things that are happening here at IST, but also the excitement and enthusiasm with what the scientists are talking about, the research that they're doing, and the impact it could potentially have. So, you know, talking about being proud of the innovation and the sustainable, discoveries that we're making here in Europe, what do you think we can do really to encourage scientists to take this leap from research to industry? Because they seem enthusiastic enough, and it's not like they really have to choose between being a professor and launching a company, or being CSO, or founding a company. What do you think we need to do to maybe encourage people to take that leap? Dorothee or Erich, either of you? I mean, the other two as well, but just because you've done it.
Well, I think universities should have hubs, so places where young scientists can put their startup and remain sort of in a university environment still, but then go their first steps without having to. At least many towns, big universities have these hubs, these places where the people can rent a lab or space for their computers or whatever. But many universities don't, and Innsbruck doesn't have it at all. So we had to go out and renovate office space into a laboratory to found our company, which was, of course, pretty difficult. I mean, like Munich and also Vienna, cities, or Zurich, cities that are very successful in spin-offs, they have these extra centers where young companies can start and be supervised properly. And the supervision should also not only be concerning patents, but also in strategic ways to move forward. I mean, we Europeans are usually not very strategic. I think the US people are much more strategic. They learn this more already at school. Well, we sort of remain in this permanent discussion mode instead of thinking where to go and what to do about it. So I think with a culture in these hubs where you sort of motivate people to make their strategic plans for themselves and for their companies could help these companies to be more successful.
So like a physical infrastructure, kind of married with a little bit of a strategic consulting infrastructure, if that's what I've understood correctly. Yeah. And Eric, do you agree? Are there other ways we can encourage?
So I think I agree to everything Dorothy said, and I have the privilege to be in Vienna, where there are now startup labs, and 11 years ago there haven't been startup labs, and I think infrastructure can be helpful. What we also have, especially in Austria, is we have excellent opportunities from seed financing. Like every entrepreneur or scientist who has some ideas can talk to some governmental agencies and will have support and potentially money from state. What's very difficult or more difficult is then to get into the growth phase and have more substantial funding. But I think right now we have very good possibilities from the incubation and from the seed financing. Where I not necessarily agree is the idea of working as a scientist part-time and working as an entrepreneur part-time. I'm a big believer in the idea that the true currency of entrepreneurship is blood, sweat, and tears. And I think at some time you need to jump into the pond and swim or not.
Eric, as an entrepreneur, I will totally sign that. Absolutely. Blood, sweat, and tears. Ingrid, so how can we help scientists then also kind of identify, if we say the funding is there, potentially the infrastructure is also there in some cases, how can we help them identify possible applications of the research that they're doing? What can we do as research institutions or as colleagues, as professors? What can be done in that way?
I think you can't lump all researchers together. I mean, looking at some of those people in the presentation just now in the video, you can see that they're already fired up by the potential applications of their research. They don't need anyone to tell them what their research might end up doing. However, having said that, I think there are plenty of people who need a bit of help to think in those terms of what I'm doing is not just interesting to publish, but is also something that could maybe by somebody else be made into something really practical. And I think those people are the people that we should be trying to reach in tech transfer and maintain a good relationship, open channels of communication, and simply try to keep them on the radar, inform them about what's happening in their fields, invite them to come and talk to us, share ideas that may or may not be mature inventions, but simply things that may in the future lead to a true innovation, and then be ready to kind of jump on those things and work with those researchers to find a route to potential commercialization.
So just to take it back a little bit, zoom out again, we're back in the drone shot. Matthias, in your opinion, what do you think are the most promising fields of research in Austria in particular, maybe not just at IST, although feel free to mention anything at IST, but also just for innovative products and services that are future-oriented, forward-looking. What do you see as Austria's strength there?
Oh, that's a tough one, Maggie. I mean, I didn't prepare for it, but I still try something. Because I do believe I picked, like Ingrid, I picked something up, not the passion, I picked that up as well in the video, but also the interdisciplinary approach. I think that's number one. I mean, that's not yet the answer, but I think that's quite crucial to think about disciplines, I mean, in general. My second comment would be, and that's something I just published, I mean, I framed it as a biorevolution, but this confluence between, on the one hand, progress on biology, but also automation, computing, and AI. And I feel Austria is very well positioned, given its heritage, I mean, on the biology side, to really dive into that. And you see that a little bit reflected in many areas we saw in the video. And then, of course, we're coming back to my presentation. I think, obviously, in terms of, let's say, the computing side, the AI side, there's something to catch up on, because I don't think that game has been played. Because sometimes in Europe, we discuss it as, the big, large companies are always there, and we are already at the end. I would claim we are only at the beginning of the understanding of what's possible, to give also a little bit hope into this discussion.
Always good to inject a little hope into the discussion surrounding innovation, absolutely. And I think we're going to move on now, because at IST, we don't just have fantastic research happening on a lab level with great scientists who are enthusiastic about their solutions and about what they're doing, but we also have tech transfer opportunities that actually have taken scientific accomplishments and have already taken steps towards commercialization, and some even actually have gone to market. Let's take a look.
In just 10 years, IST Austria has become one of the world's leading scientific research institutes. Groundbreaking scientific discoveries have been made. many with the potential to be transformed into successful businesses. With such transformations in mind, Marcus van Gogh has facilitated the development of a dynamic technology transfer ecosystem that comprises 3 pillars.
The first one is a smoothly run tech transfer operation in our tech transfer company, Twist. The second is really affordable and well-equipped experimental facilities here at IST Park. And the third is IST Cube, a venture fund that provides funding and network for the further growth of our spin-off companies.
IST Park is a joint venture between Lower Austria's business agency EcoPlus and IST Austria. To guarantee a seamless transition between science and industry, it runs its facilities right next to the Institute's campus. Phalanx Biotech is a young startup in the field of synthetic proteins for biomedical applications. It's one of the companies whose labs are located at IST Park in order to benefit from the proximity to IST Austria.
One of the several advantages that we have by working in the IST is the exchange of science and ideas with other scientists that they have expertise that we might not have as a small team that we are. And this can help develop our processes and ideas in a better way.
An open office infrastructure is combined with brand new laboratories and shared research facilities with state-of-the-art equipment.
The other advantage is that we can, of course, use some of the equipment that is impossible to acquire as a small company. So we can just book their technology and their machines to use them.
Partnerships with other institutes have also led to exciting technology transfer projects. Solgate is a startup born of cooperation between SEM and IST Austria. The company works on new drugs that target membrane transporters involved in many diseases.
Some of the people around me have been affected by different diseases, and I think trying to think of new ways that could help other patients in the future is something that is very motivating to me. And tech transfer here plays a very crucial part. We work very closely with them. We need their help. We're here to learn from their achievements. We're basically trying to turn things that we find in basic research that is done at SEM or at ISTA and bring it together into a setting where we together build a company. There is something very exciting about developing something new, a new startup, a new idea, taking scientific rigor from basic research and translating that into findings that perhaps in the future can help patients of different diseases.
The support provided by the technology transfer ecosystem allows scientists to concentrate on what they do best.
It's obvious that when you come up with the idea of creating something different or that goes outside from your comfort zone, it's nice to have experts around. And I think this type of support is essential to be able to really do something seriously.
Harold Vladar was one of the first founders to join the IST Park. His company, Ribbon Biolabs, is developing an innovative technology to synthesize long DNA molecules.
3 years ago, I decided I wanted to become an entrepreneur and pursue some ideas for synthetic biology. And IST was supporting me in the sense that they first took me as their incubee in the IST Cube, and later they became one of our investors. My personal motivation behind Ribbon is to create impact, to contribute with a new type of technology that facilitates the growth and development of the industry. Essentially, many regard synthetic biology as the fourth industrial revolution, and I'm very motivated and inspired by contributing to the growth and development of it.
10 companies, from startups to established businesses, already profit from the outstanding infrastructure, access to highly talented people, and inspiring atmosphere of the community in and around IST Austria.
So we saw now some of the fantastic infrastructure and also, infrastructure that actually can be used by scientists and entrepreneurs. They can rent it. They can also use the facilities here, which is also a great way of learning from each other, interdisciplinary on another level. People have already gone to business. Maybe, Ingrid, we saw you in the video as well. And perhaps you could tell us a little bit, maybe, are there any, examples or initiatives that you see in Austria or practices in Austria that you think are especially promising or should be, rolled out and made more, influential?
Yeah, certainly. I think here I'd like to mention our fellowship program. So we have a special program called the Twist Fellowship, which is aimed at researchers who think they might have an idea that could be commercially interesting and would be prepared in principle to start a company, but it's simply too early. They're not sure if they're ready for that journey and so on. And this is something that Dorothy alluded to earlier, I think. So the idea is to incubate these researchers on their journey to a potential startup, but in a fairly safe environment where they get a lot of advice, a lot of support, input from our side, but nevertheless a gentle nudge to get them moving on that journey so that at the end of a reasonably short period of time, they can make that decision whether to make that jump, as Eric said, to jump right out of academia, or whether they decide that the technology or they as a person are not ready to do that yet. And we do have a national scheme in Austria, the spin-off fellowships offered by the FFG, in the past at least. They're slightly different. I think what we can achieve with these fellowships is really dependent on the kind of mentoring that we give those people. And so I would welcome that kind of scheme to be rolled out more broadly in Austria and Europe, but only under conditions where people are really getting quality advice and they're being really helped along their journey rather than simply having money thrown at them.
Yes, I think that that's also something we can say that Europe is perhaps better at, of really, these sustainable programs. Also, we talked earlier with Matthias about Horizon 2020. I actually wanted to come back to something Matthias said in his talk as well. That this copy-paste approach of this is how they do it in the U.S., then we should just copy-paste that onto Europe and we'll be fine. That's not going to work out. And perhaps, is there something specific we can do? To basically take what we have here in Europe, not only scientifically speaking or research-wise, but also culturally speaking, and really get the best out of what our culture also, gives us already as a kind of starting point. What can we do that's Europe-specific, so to say, to enliven the go-to-market of scientists? Ingrid, you don't have to answer that one too. Matthias, maybe you have an idea.
I mean, maybe I kick us off because I assume we all have some ideas here. But I mean, I try to make that explicit statement also to trigger a little bit the discussion. What could we do differently? And if you step back, what's different? I mean, we have actually, I would argue, high quality in many disciplines. So this collaboration, interdisciplinarity, we could very well play. The second thing is we have quite a history of public-private partnership and collaboration. Some might say not always as efficient and effective as, but it's a very great heritage. And I think on those dimensions, I think we can do a lot. And I think also to our earlier dialogue, I think if we could somehow convince more scientists, if they want to have impact, they need to at least collaborate or get their ideas into commercial entities to drive them also adoption. We could achieve a lot there. I mean, those might be 2-3 thoughts.
Eric, as an entrepreneur yourself, do you have any thoughts about what European entrepreneurs do great?
I think we are very good in being creative, finding technical solutions, and I mean, you said I'm not positive enough in my earlier statement.
You can be negative. It's all right. We got.
I mean, it might not be the best to copy and paste American principles, but there's so much we can learn when it comes to be proud on achievements, be positive on entrepreneurship, be positive on and aggressive by bringing things forward, be positive in taking risks. And I think we as society should learn more about this risk positivity than we have currently.
Dorothee, I think, agrees with you. She was also speaking earlier about the fact that her having spent so much time in America, that she gained a lot of that that chutzpah, as they say in Yiddish, to kind of really go forward and be loud and proud about what she's accomplishing and doing. But Dorothee, maybe could you speak a little bit to kind of what systemic hurdles? I mean, you actually brought your ideas and research to fruition in Innsbruck, in Austria. Were there systemic hurdles that you encountered that could be adapted to really improve the lot, so that not just people like you who already have a little bit of more outgoing mindset have an easier way of it? Were there systemic hurdles that you encountered?
Well, I mean, yes, a lot, but I think they may really be typical for small university towns that are not really very international. I mean, the Nordkette is high, so not much comes over to Tyrol, maybe. So, yeah, I think I was the first real spin-off in the university, and I had to pave the way, and hopefully the next ones will have it more easier. So I don't think it's very typical what I experienced. To be the first spin-off in 2014 is probably not a good sign for a university. But I think some things that we already mentioned, but that's in our culture. And I think that is, I don't think the word Streber, you can really translate it into English. So
yeah, goody two-shoes or something.
Smart and good in class is something negative, especially in the German-speaking countries. And I think we should really try to, in society, to put more positive, positive image to people that really go forward. They're not all elbows, and they're not all trying to be smart and put others down. And I think this is a cultural problem, especially in the German-speaking countries. Maybe not so much in Switzerland, but in Germany and Austria, this you always have to keep your head down. So I think that's most of the problem. We have the brains, we have good ideas, we have the funding. We could do a little bit more risk taking also on the funding side than maybe in the US. The venture capital amounts are much higher than those that are spent in Europe. That's why probably also they do late stage more, and we do a lot of early stage where not so much money is involved. But I think the whole way society works is not pro-entrepreneurship. But then I wanted, I'm going to question this whole thing we're doing here now, but is it really that bad? I mean, we live quite good, don't we, here, compared to the US? So, burning money and having hire and fire cultures, which is goes together with the risk taking, may also not always be the way to go. So maybe we can find a way in between where we take a little bit more risks, but still don't give up our ethical and moral background we have in entrepreneurship here.
I think that's a beautifully Austrian suggestion. We find a middle ground, we find a middle way. We don't go all the way copy-paste. I'm sure you guys have heard this quote before, and I'm not sure who said it first, but many people have repeated it. Americans, in America, so what was it? How did it go exactly? Oh yeah. So in America, everything is allowed until it's forbidden, and in Europe, everything's forbidden until it's allowed. So there's this kind of idea of you don't want to overstep a boundary. Ingrid, in your work with tech transfer, do you encounter boundaries? Do you encounter things where you say, I'd love to help this, this group of researchers make the next step, but there's this hurdle that we can't overcome? Do you encounter that at all?
Yes, and I think a lot of it is similar to what Dorothee mentioned. It's because we're doing a lot of things the first time. And I envisage it's going to get easier and easier as there are more and more entrepreneurial people who want to do cool things at our universities in Austria. And the more we do, the easier it becomes, the more the paths are laid out, the more the best practices are established. So I think it's actually quite a rosy future. It's just at the beginning, it's difficult to get all those processes in place and do things right.
I think a lot of Austria was surprised to see when lockdown happened and 16th of March and everybody stopped moving, right? How fast digitization went for bureaucracy. That was amazing, right? Years and decades we've been waiting. So now, as a final question, I'd like to kind of ask each of you for a final statement. We've had part of it now from Ingrid, a little bit kind of a look to the future. If we succeed in improving tech transfer in Austria and Europe, what impact will that have on Austria and Europe, both for science and for startups and for that innovation economy, but also for society? Who'd like to start us off?
I dare something because maybe the easier comment, the first comment is easier. No, so
okay.
That aside. So I would hope, I mean, if one gets it right in Austria and in Europe overall, that we don't have such a bleak picture of young companies being empty. I mean, the slate empty on Europe. So I would hope that a good percentage, let's say a 10% refreshment rate, that out of the top 100, there are 5 to 10 young companies that are really get to scale out of Europe, and by that also having substantial impact on the fields we discussed together.
Mm-hmm. Dorothee, do you have a thought about the future for us?
Well, potentially maybe a bit slower than other countries in Europe and other parts of the world in Europe, but potentially we're also more sustainable. So maybe what we build up will be really companies that make a difference in the end, not only more computers and more whatever, but maybe like on new energy types or on cures of disease, where we may or allow a vaccine for SARS coronavirus too. So maybe we will be a little bit late, but then more sustainables, and our companies will have an ethical infrastructure. So that's what I hope.
Beautiful. Eric, what about you? What do
So
you see
here's
coming?
my prediction. My prediction is that more entrepreneurship in Austria will lead to better economic success and better society.
Those are fantastic predictions. Ingrid, you have one last thought for us before we sign off.
Yeah, I think this is something that we have to do. We have to do tech transfer properly, because the alternative is almost unthinkable. If all of the people in our society who have good ideas and have entrepreneurial leanings then leave us to go to other places, you know, what's left? We're going to be a backwater.
Absolutely. Well, we definitely won't be a backwater here at IST, because so much innovation is happening here already. As a closing, I mean, we've heard now so many good things about the potential for sustainable change, for sustainable innovation, and how that sometimes when it takes longer to get there, that means it's going to be around for longer. And that's also something I think we can look forward to in the next decades and the coming years here in Austria and Europe and at IST. So, ladies and gentlemen in the audience, first of all, I'd like to say a big thank you to the panel. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you for giving us your insights. And to the audience, thank you so much for watching. And now you have the chance for another 30 minutes to network and meet and talk and ask questions in 2 breakout rooms. We have 2 breakout rooms on different subjects. So you can either kind of continue the debate of what we were talking about just now, about tech transfer in Austria and Europe, share your ideas, find out more about details on something we talked about now. And there's also another breakout room on research, tech transfer, and the IST Cube in specific. So you just follow the link in the email that you got yesterday, and you'll have the choice to join either of those 2 breakout rooms. So thank you again for joining us. If you have any questions or IST-specific requests or questions, you can also write to twist@ist.ac.at. So thank you again for watching. I look forward to also collaborating and potentially also seeing you in person here for the Science Industry Talk 2021. So enjoy networking and stay safe.